Heads up, if you talk too loud, your voice may be on YouTube later. It always scares some kids a little bit. They're like, oh, I don't want my conversation being recorded. All right, so we're doing P2 today, or as much of P2 as we can. So we're doing some basic graph reminder. So can anyone remind me, how does my little graph go here? What are my different quadrants? Where do I start? Diamond? Oh, nope, sorry, I thought you were signaling me. Who wants to start? Yep, Gwenna.
Top left is 1.
Top left is 1. Everyone agree with Gwenna?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say top right is 1.
Oh.
And then top left is 2. Good. And then what?
And then it's 3 and then 4.
Good. Oh shoot. Yep, summer hits us hard. Quadrant 1, while we want it to be in the top left, it's in the top right. We call the horizontal axis the which axis? X. Mm-hmm. And then we call the vertical axis the Y. And why do I have a little arrow pointing to that middle point? What do we call this? The origin. Very good, the origin. All right, that's a little just reminder of the graph. Shockingly, we do a fair amount with the graph with quadrants and stuff come into trig. A lot of it's just kind of a reminder, so we're all talking about the same thing as we move on from here. All right, so now we're gonna plot and label. Just a little reminder. Again, I'm pretending like you guys don't remember anything from any math you've ever taken. All of my first ones are my X, my second ones are my Y. So A1, -1 will be down here. So I did my X left and right, then I did my Y up and down. Then I'm gonna do B. My X is 2, so I'm gonna go right to 2, and I don't go up and down any, so my B goes there. And then my C, excuse me, is gonna be -3, -2. So left 3, down 2, and C is approximately there. Make sure you label your points with letters so that I know what you're talking about. But other than that, pretty self-explanatory, right? Nice, all right, keep moving. A little graph review. Now we're gonna remind ourselves some absolute values. What do we know about absolute values? Does anyone remember about absolute values?
I think that's always positive.
Always positive. So whatever's inside is positive, right? Sorry, John, were you saying something more?
I was saying it always makes it positive.
Always makes it positive, good. It doesn't change the sign, it just makes it positive. So if it's negative, it becomes positive. So this 6 plus absolute value of -6 is like 6 plus 6, which we know is just 12. Letter B, I've got an addition sign inside of my absolute value, so I need to simplify that to one number before I deal with the absolute value. So -3 plus 4 is gonna be absolute value of 1. Absolute value of 1 is just 1. You don't need those in-between steps if you can do them in your head, but I know my math is a little rusty from this summer, so in case yours is, I want you to see all my thoughts. Okay, next one I've got 5 minus -5. Well, we know that absolute value makes that -5 positive, so I'm gonna do 5 minus 5, which is simply 0. And then the last one I've got pi minus 4. Pi is approximately what? 3.14, so I'm doing approximately 3.14 minus 4. That's going to be a negative number. I don't need us to do necessarily decimals in our head. That doesn't make you any better at pre-cal than anybody else. That's absolute value of -0.86. And so once we do the absolute value of that, we just get 0.86. All right. Pretty easy warm up, right? Okay. Now we're gonna get into something that I swear we do like the first unit every math class you've ever taken. I know I did this with you in geometry. I know you did this in algebra 1 and algebra 2. We are finding AB. AB without any line on top, without any symbol, means the distance. So we're gonna find the distance. Does anyone remember the distance formula? I'm gonna square that plus x2 minus x1. And you can have your x's first or your y's first, it doesn't matter. Remember, we have an addition sign between them, so it's commutative either way. And then don't forget what's over all of this formula. A giant square root. So distance formula is a big square root. You're doing the difference of the y's. squared plus the difference of the x's squared. Is that ringing a little bit of bells? Okay, let's do a couple problems like that. So we're going to find the distance. It doesn't matter where you start, just label your points and then act accordingly. So for this one, I'm going to label my A as my x1, y1, and my B as my x2, y2. So when I do my distance formula, I'm going to say d distance equals giant square root. We're going to do our y2, negative 1 minus y1, which is 2, squared, plus, and then I'm going to do my x's, 4 minus 3 squared. Again, you can do your x's first. You may have them in different orders than me. Because we're squaring it and because we're adding it, you should still get the same answer as long as you kept all the signs integrity. So I've got negative 1 plus negative 2 is going to be negative 3 squared. And then 4 minus 3 is going to be 1 squared. We know negative 3 squared is going to be 9, 1 squared is 1, so I get radical 10. Now, if I wanted to, I could look and see if I could simplify it. Radical 10, 10 just simplifies to 2 and 5. There's no double factor, so we actually are simple as we are. So this is your best answer, radical 10. That's my distance. Okay, I'm going to be quiet. I want you to try letter B. So I want you to try this on your own. Okay, letter B. I'll give you a minute. I'm going to start on my paper so you can check on your work on the board if you're having a question. I might have to simplify my radical, so I'm going to check that right now. Oh, okay, no. You think you haven't checked your answer on the board? All right, I thought 82 would be simplified. It's not. 2 times 41, I couldn't get anything as a double factor, so that's as good as we get. Any questions so far? How do I what? How do I get 1? 0 minus negative 1. So I did my x is 0 minus negative 1. You what? Oh, it might look like a 7. The 7's the y's. So remember that we have to do the x's together. So I did my 0 and negative 1 together, and then I did my y's together. So I did 7 and negative 2 together. Right. Okay, the comment underneath says the word midpoint. Do you remember we learned a formula for midpoint a while ago too? We're going to remind ourselves what that was. Does anyone off the top of their head remember the midpoint formula? The midpoint. I see some of our brains like trying. We're like, I don't know, don't feel confident enough. Midpoint formula is an ordered pair. So I'm going to have an x term and a y term. And it's my x's added together. So x1 plus y1, or x2, x1 plus y2. None of that was right. x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and then my y's added together, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So again, it's a ordered pair. So my new x term is my x's added together. My new y term is my y's added together, both of them divided by 2, to find the middle between them, to find that average. The biggest problem I see here is that we forget that it's a plus between them. It's not a minus like almost all of our other formulas, it's a plus right there. So I'm gonna do this one out with you guys right now. So I'm gonna do my A is gonna be x1, y1. My B is my x2, y2. And when I do my midpoint, I'm gonna do my x's added together, so 3 plus -2 divided by 2. And then my y's added together, 7 plus 11 divided by 2. Three plus -2 is going to be 1 over 2, and then 7 plus 11 is going to be 18 over 2. If you like to write 1/2 as 0.5, that's totally fine with me. I like it as a fraction, so I'm going to leave it as 1/2. But if you would prefer to write it as 0.5, that is okay as well. So just be consistent with what you do. And then my 18 over 2 is going to be 9. 1/2 comma 9. Okay. Can you try the next one? Oh, yeah. Yep, the formula. There you go. So now you can see my example and you have the formula. I want you to try letter B. You're done. I'm going to do it with you. Check your work. Remember to do your x's together. Make sure to do your y's together. Make sure to divide by 2. You guys all get 1 comma 2. Perfect. All right, how are we feeling so far? Pretty good? Okay. We're going to use these skills, mostly the distance formula right now, and we are going to do area and perimeter of a couple shapes. We're actually going to do letter B first because I think it's the easier one, so I think it's going to be helpful to see that one when it's easier first. So it says find the area and perimeter. First, remind me, what's the formula for area of let's do a rectangle first. Length times width. We'll do a triangle in a second. And then what's the perimeter of a rectangle? Tell me what you're doing when you do perimeter. Add all the sides. So you can do it a couple different ways. I like to do 2 times L plus W. You could do 2L plus 2W. You could do L plus W plus W, whatever floats your boat. So these are for a rectangle. A rectangle, these are my area and perimeters. And the reason I wanted to do rectangle first is I want to do letter B, and we're going to go solve this one out. What I want you to do is draw a little coordinate plane. I want you to graph those points so we can see what's going on here. You can always do distance, but I'm going to argue by graphing this one, we're going to just be able to look at the graph and know what the length and what the width is, how long it is. All right, so I drew my rectangle. Everybody look at the board. Does yours look something like mine? Okay, what's my length here? What's one of the sides' length? 6, very good. How'd you know that? Did you do your distance formula and everything? No, right? What did you do? You can just count it, right? You physically can count it. I'm gonna argue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're gonna go over by 6. So like A to D and B to C are both 6, right? How much do we go up? What's my width gonna be? I think 5. Yeah, Griffin, right? We went from 1 up to 6, so that's a distance of 5. So I'm using 5 and 6 as my length and width. Can you find area very easily and find perimeter very easily? All right, stop and do that. Area is length times width, so 5 times 6. Area is going to be 30. Since we don't know exactly how long it is, we're going to throw a little U for units, and area is always units squared. And then perimeter is going to be 2 times 6 plus 5, or 2 times 6 plus 2 times 5, and that's going to be 2 times 11, which is going to be 22, which is just normal units. So this is my example of don't work harder, work smarter. If we don't have to do a distance formula, I'm not going to sit here and do 4 distances or even 2 distances to know what's going on. I graphed and I could literally count. Now, the next one we're going to do, we're not going to be able to do it that easily. I don't think for any of them. So I wanted to do an easy example while we had a minute. Okay, you ready to do a little harder example? Okay, jump back to letter A. This is now a triangle. So let's graph this triangle and kind of see what's going on for us. See where we're at. All right, now I've got my triangle. Unfortunately, I don't have any straight lines here where I can just count like how many like units over we went or however many units up we went. We actually have to do distance formula here. So we're gonna practice this, okay? Why don't we do this? How about my farthest 2 rows? So Tyler, your row, and Griffin, your row. You guys do distance AB. Distance AB. Mike and Aiden, your guys' row, you guys do distance BC. And then this last row and me will do distance AC, okay? So we have to trust our teammates or trust our friends that they're gonna do the right thing, but everybody else, you do your distance and we'll compare from there, okay? I've got my distance AC on the board. If you did that, you can check it with me. My teammates that did AC, you guys did the same thing I did. Cool. All right, who did AB? Someone who did AB, can you tell me what you got? You got square root 41. Perfect. And then somebody who did BC, can you tell me what you got? You had square root 41 too. Okay, awesome. Everybody look at the board. Did you get the same answer as me and what Dervilla did? Okay. Okay, that is helpful to us because that is the length of my shape now. So AB is length root 41, BC is length root 41, and AC is length root 82. Now I know it's been a long time since I've had you in geometry, but what I have right here is a special right triangle. Do you remember when we did right triangles and we had two legs that were the same length? And then the third side, my hypotenuse was root 2 times the other length. I didn't expect you to remember that, but now that I see that, I know that I have a right triangle, and that makes it easy for me to find area. And I can find perimeter pretty simply because perimeter is what again? Just adding up all the sides, right? So when I do my area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Since I have a right angle, one of the legs, AB, is my base, let's say, and then my other leg, BC, is my height. So I'm going to do 1/2 of root 41 times root 41 to find my area. Are we okay with that? Okay, let's do it. Area is going to be 1/2 times root 41 times root 41. When I multiply root 41 times root 41, I just get a normal 41. And unfortunately, 41 is not divisible by 2, so you can leave it as 41 over 2, or we can make it a decimal. It is 20.5 units squared. Now, when I do my perimeter, we're going to add up all the sides. I've got root 41 plus root 41 plus root 82. What can I do here?
I was just gonna say, like, try to get rid of the square roots.
I wouldn't even worry about that. We can't do much to get rid of them. We're going to leave them. Can I combine anything in here? My root 41s, right? If we were solving for like X or something, we'd get rid of them. But right here, we're just simplifying. You're going to have an ugly answer. 2 root 41 plus root 82. That's good enough. It's perimeter, so we're going to throw a little U behind it for my units. But that's it. Sometimes we get pretty answers like we did on the last one where my perimeter was 22. And sometimes we get ugly answers where my answer is 2 root 41 plus root 82. And that's okay. All right, flip your paper over. And we've got another graphing problem. It says, prove that the diagonals of the figures formed by the points bisect each other. Okay, let's draw a picture first to kind of see what's going on. So I'm going to draw a picture, see how what the shape even looks like, what would these diagonals even look like. Sure, as you draw your picture, you're labeling your points. Now we're all just sketching, so if your picture doesn't look super great, that's okay. We're just trying our best. All right, so it's saying that we want the diagonals of the shape to bisect each other. And again, my graph will not be exact, so mine will probably not look like it bisects each other. But this is kind of taking us back to geometry. Can anyone tell me what bisect means? Explain it like a 5-year-old. I don't need a math explanation, just like what does bisect mean to you? Split into 2. The only thing is I want it to be 2 equal pieces. So I would say cut in half. So the most basic explanation, I'd say bisect means to cut in half. So that means that the diagonals are not the same length. It just means that when they touch each other, this distance should be the same as this. And then my A to the middle should be the same as my C to the middle. Now mine doesn't look super exact, which is why we're not going to use a picture to prove this point. We're going to use our math, okay? So if we're talking about cutting something in half, do you think I care about the distance formula or do you think I care about the midpoint formula? Midpoint, because I care about cutting it in half. So I'm going to use my midpoint formula here. And between what 2 points do I care about the midpoint? C and A, and then B and D. Perfect. Okay, let's again work smarter, not harder. So why don't boys, you find the midpoint of AC, girls find the midpoint of BD. This isn't the first time we learned it, so we don't need to do it 20 million times. That's why we're kind of splitting up the work. So find the midpoint of AC and of BD. Right. Did everybody get 2, 2? Perfect. That proves it because my midpoints are the same. So because these are the same, I'm going to say yes. And I can say because the midpoints are the same. Which means if their midpoints are the same, they bisect each other. All right, we're doing great. You guys ready to switch some gears and try something different? Okay, we're talking about equations of circles. Do you guys do that in Algebra 2, equations of circles? Have you ever done the equation of circles? Did I do that with you in geometry? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Okay, so it sounds like we don't remember at all. I don't remember if we got to that. So I'll pretend like this is brand new. Okay, when you write the equation of a circle, it looks a little bit funny because it's not like a y equals equation like literally the rest of our math career has been. The equation of a circle looks like this. It goes x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. X and y are your constant variables. They are always going to be x and y in your problem. The h and the k and the r is what changes, and that's what we have to put numbers in for. The coordinate point h comma k is the center of the circle. So I have to do the opposite sign. So I'm doing x minus h, and so I switch that sign. It's not negative h, it's just normal h when I take it out of the parentheses. Kind of see what I'm talking about in a second. The r, what do you think r stands for in a circle? Radius. Awesome. It's your radius. So the only thing I care about in these circle problems is the center of the circle and the radius. So we want to find those things, and we're going to write the equation of my circle. Luckily, if I give it to you like I did these first 3 problems, it's just a simple writing it out. So I can write out, I can put zeros in my equation. I'll show you, but we know 0 is redundant, so you don't necessarily have to write it. So if I were to write this is my h, this is my k, this is my r. So I would write it as x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals 3 squared. Now, we know x minus 0 is just x, correct? So we can simplify that to be x squared. Similarly, y minus 0 squared is just going to be y squared. And then 3 squared is 9. You don't need this first step, but I like to show it to you, especially as we're reminding ourselves or as we're learning it the first time. So my equation of the circle is x squared plus y squared equals 9. Cool. It's not that hard. Let's do the next one. Same thing. 5 is my h, negative 4 is my k. Okay, so I'm going to do x minus h, so x minus 5 squared plus, and I'm going to do y minus k. Well, k is -4, so I'm going to do y minus -4 squared. We know minus and negative is a positive, so you could go directly to a positive, that's okay. And then that equals 6 squared, which is 36. I do not want you to square out x minus 5. I don't want you to FOIL that. I don't want you to do anything crazy. When we're just writing the equation and I give you this much information, you just have to simply write it like this. That is good enough. X minus 5 squared plus y plus 4 squared equals 36. Any questions yet? All right, last one. Similar idea. It looks like my h is 0, so I don't need to include him. My k is 4, and my radius is √5. So instead of writing x minus 0 squared, I'm just going to write x squared. However, my y, though, has a friend. I've got to do y minus 4 squared. And what's √5 squared? 5. I don't need to do anything crazy. Just leave it as 5. Now, the next 3 problems are going backwards, where I want you to find the center and the radius. Do you think you can try that on your own? Or do you want me to do the first one with you? What? Can we do the first one? I can do the first one. Okay, so my h is with the x, my k is with the y, and then 16 is r squared. Okay, so when I take them out, I switch my sign, so it's not -2 and +3, it's going to be +2 and -3. Because remember, when I put it in, I did x minus h, so h is the +2. And then r squared is 16. R is just going to be, what squared is 16? 4. Does that help a little bit? Okay, take a second, try the next 2. All right, find a pausing point. Okay, what's my center for letter B? -5, 0. And what is my radius going to be? Good, square root of 7. You guys could not be fooled. So if 7 is my r squared, you have to do the square root of it in order to get my radius. Radius is √7. All right, what about my center on letter C? 0, 0. And what's my radius? √10. Awesome. Not too bad, right? Circles aren't too hard. We're going to do a few more things with circles, but I wanted to kind of give you a little T-ball start with this, kind of see where we're at. We're going to do a little bit of absolute value, and then we're going to do some more circle stuff. So, absolute value. We only really hit absolute value hard at the beginning of the year. Again, I think this is something that we've always done. And I don't know how you've learned this in the past. I'm going to teach it maybe a little bit different than what you've talked about in the past. So it says write using absolute value. So we're going to write an equation. Absolute value will be in the equation. We're saying the distance between x and 3 is 8. Okay. So that means, and I'm just going to kind of draw a little number line. You don't have to do this. You can just watch and listen. It says the distance between some number and 3 is 8. Now, I don't know what that some number is, but I know that 3 is a number that I care about. And I know that there's another number somewhere out here on my number line. And the distance between 3 and that number is 8. So it might be I'm doing plus 8. So my x over here is going to be 11. So my x could be 11. Or I could go 8 in the opposite direction. And 3 minus 8 is going to be -5. So x could be anywhere between -5 and 7. Or it could be -5 or 7. When we write this, I don't care what x is. I'm still writing my equation. but I'm thinking about it this way. I'm gonna say, okay, x minus 3, the distance of that is 8. I like to use my absolute values to think of it as a distance. I put absolute value there because if I did like 11 minus 3, that's positive 8, right? If I did negative 5 minus 3, that's negative 8, but 8 is the distance, and so when I do absolute value of that distance, I get 8. So my answers are always going to be using the distance, so we're going to be minusing, we're going to have absolute values, and whatever the distance is my answer. Okay? So similarly for the next one, it says the distance between x and negative 2 is more than 7. Okay, the distance here is 7. So 7 is on the other side of the equal sign. We care about x and negative 2. So we're going to do x minus negative 2, which we know x minus negative 2 is the same thing as x plus 2. And it says more than 7. Am I going to do an equal sign or an inequality? Which inequality? Greater than. Okay. Questions yet? Okay. This next one says the distance between 4 and x is 12. Now I know all the other ones said x and a number, and this one says a number and x. That doesn't matter to me because we're still doing the absolute value. The distance is still 12. So I'm still going to write it as x minus 4, and that is or equals 12. So again, it doesn't matter if I wrote x first or a number first, I'm still doing x minus that number. And the last one, the distance between x and 5 is no more than 3. So x minus 5 is what I'm caring about. No more than 3. 3 is my distance. And no more means which sign? Less than. Can we include 3?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I agree with that. Less than or equal to. Right. Doing good? You guys are killing it today, okay? Flip your paper over. And end with some circle stuff. Okay. This one says, write the equation of a circle whose diameter has the following endpoints, okay? So we are going to write the equation of the circle. I'm going to remind myself what the equation of the circle is because it's no longer on my paper. Remember, it's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Now, none of those symbols have the diameter terms in them. So the diameter is not something I can just plug into h or k or r. Those are numbers that I'm going to use to find diameter and find my center. So I'm going to draw my circle. This is one reason I like Notability is I can't draw a good circle. And I truly do not care where your points go. I just want the diameter somewhere in here, so just some distance across the circle. And we're going to label one of my points 3, -6, and the other point 4, 0. The picture is not there to prove anything. It's just to help me keep everything like in my head. Because what I need to write my equation is I need the center and I need the radius. Okay. How will I find the center of the circle? Midpoint, very good, John. We need to find the midpoint of the circle. So we're going to do the midpoint of these 2 points. That will be my center. And I'm going to just write center equals midpoint, and then I'm going to solve it off to the side. So I'm going to do 3 plus 4 divided by 2, and then -6 plus 0 divided by 2. I get 7 over 2, comma, -6 over 2. Since we're going to do some work with this, I am going to make that 7 over 2 3.5, and my -6 over 2 will be negative. Okay, so I'm halfway done because I've got 3.5, -3. Those are my h and my k. So I have my h and my k down. I just need my r. I'm gonna go label my picture just so I kind of keep everything straight. Now, how am I gonna find my radius? Distance. And we're gonna use, you can use a couple different things. I'm gonna use this center, and I'm probably gonna use the 0.40 because anytime I have an option to use a 0, I'm gonna use it because that makes it a little bit easier. You also could do 3.5 -3 and then the other point on the diameter, you could do 3 -6. Or you could even do the entire distance, so endpoint to endpoint, and divide that by 2 to find the radius. So we've got a couple different options. Is everybody okay with those options? Okay, we're gonna do distance. I'm gonna do 3.5 -3 as one point and 40 as my other point. So next to radius, I'm gonna write distance to remind myself later that's what we did. So off to the side, I'm gonna do my distance. Okay, so my y's, I'm gonna do 0 minus -3 squared plus my x's 4 minus 3.5 squared. It gives me 3 squared plus 0.5 squared, which is 9 plus, is that 0.25? Got square root of 9.25. Kind of ugly, but it's okay. This is my radius. So now I'm going to put these two pieces together. I'm going to say x minus 3.5 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals, and I have to do radius squared, so square root of 9.25 squared is just 9.25. Now, if you wrote the square root and the square, that's okay. It's just cleanest if I get rid of both of those. That's my equation of my circle. Okay, how are we feeling? Can you do another one like this? I'm gonna let you start by yourself. The one underneath it is just like this one. So I'm gonna leave this on the board. You know, you can go back and find your formulas. Then I'll start working in 1 second. Right, I've got my center on the board and I've got my radius on the board. Feel free to check. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, last thing we gotta do is just put them all together. X minus 3 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals square root of, or square of the square root of 34, which is just 34. right, how are we feeling? Got one more type of problem. I'll type for a second if anybody's still looking at this though. This is one of the hardest things that we've done today because we're combining all the formulas we've learned or relearned. We did center, or we did midpoint, we did distance, we did circle. We're kind of combining everything we did today. The last thing says M is the midpoint of AB. And I know we did this in geometry. I also know you've slept between now and then. And it was one of the harder things we did in geometry. So we had this segment, we'll call this AB. And we knew what A was, and we knew what M was, and we did not know what B was. So what we needed to do was use my midpoint formula, but the thing we didn't know wasn't my midpoint, it was my x2, y2. So those are going to be the variables that we use here. Okay? So we'll use this as an example. We'll say 5,1 is my A, 6,2 is my M. I still am doing the midpoint of 5,1 and x2, y2. I just don't know what those points are. So when we write our midpoint formula, we're going to still do 5 plus, I just don't know what x2 is. You can just make it a normal x. You don't have to throw x2 because there's no other x's in here. That way you don't get confused with any numbers. But I'm doing 5 plus some x, I don't know what x of b is, divided by 2. And 1 plus some y, I don't know what the y of b is, divided by 2. That's equal to my midpoint, which is 6, 2. Once we got here, I told you that we're going to separate this off. I'm going to set my x's equal to each other. So I'm going to say 5 plus x divided by 2 equals 6. So I can find my x very easily. And I'm going to do the same thing for my y's. 1 plus y over 2 equals 2. So I'm going to say 5 plus x over 2 equals 6. And I can solve that. Multiply by 2 on both sides. 5 plus x equals 12. Minus 5 on both sides. X equals 7. I can also do my y's. 1 plus y over 2 equals 2. Multiply by 2 on both sides. 1 plus y equals 4. Minus my 1, y equals 3. So this is not my midpoint, this is point B. So point B is going to be 7, 3. Questions, thoughts, comments? We are going to do letter B as like a do now tomorrow, just to remind ourselves what we learned. But I'm assigning P2 right now. So P2 is going to be due next time I see you. Okay? That's it for today. We'll get done in a couple minutes. You guys worked really hard, so I thought I'd give you the last couple minutes to kind of chill out. Good job. We do have office hours tomorrow, so if anybody needs any help, come see me. Let me turn this off.